What's going on, you guys? It's your Huggable Hipster here, and welcome back to the Hunter's Cafe. Don't mind the hunter in the corner. They're just here for your protection. Welcome back, Fighting Cowboy. We have you again on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode.
Yeah, glad to discuss some Elden Ring.
I know it's been almost 3 weeks now post-release, and it has been a whirlwind. I'm seeing so much stuff on Twitter, so much content everywhere that people are posting. So I'm really actually very excited about this one because we're going to be talking about builds, we're going to be talking about bosses, we're going to be talking about all the chaos within this DLC. But first off, how have you been? How's things been with the community doing videos and uploads and all that stuff?
It's been good. Obviously, you know, anytime there's a big FromSoft release, we see just like a huge push in content. So I've been very, very busy, obviously, doing the walkthrough prep, the walkthrough, the streams, the builds, all that stuff. It's kind of nice that things are starting to slow down a bit. I feel like I've killed Radon, like 7 different builds at this point. So
oh my God.
I'm hitting the point of like, I'm not sure what else I can do besides like going into challenge runs. But it's been a good time kind of rushing through stuff.
Very nice. Yeah, it's been interesting going through the DLC, and we were talking about this before I started filming, but I just finished the DLC yesterday and I posted the episode today, and I was like, wow, the timing on that could not have actually been better to do the podcast. But yeah, I'm first off, before we get into community questions, which you guys left under this tweet right over here, thank you guys so much for leaving it. I really, really appreciate it. We have some good variants of questions to go into. I want to know, what did you think of the DLC? Did it live up to your expectations?
In general, I really enjoyed it. I think it actually elevated Elden Ring. I think one of the big things is, especially in retrospect, now that I've replayed it as many times, is thinking about trying to replay the base game of Elden Ring. It's always daunting just because there's, you know, you got to get all the golden seeds, you got to get the sacred tears, you want to make sure you're getting your physics stuff, and even just like trying different builds and knowing like, you know, well, I don't need to go here, I don't need to go here. There's so much just general stuff that you're going to want to collect that for the most part, I tended to avoid like New Game Plus runs. But with like the DLC, I used a save manager. So I had like my one guy that was like at the start of the DLC ready to go. And I like copied that into multiple slots and then respec them into new characters. And going into the DLC with different builds, it felt way more approachable. Because, you know, like if I'm not, for example, if I know that I'm not gonna, you know, if I'm not going for the furnace guys on one character, like the jails, well, I'm not worried about that jail. There's no weapon there I need. Or, you know, well, there's nothing in Sharos that I need on this character, so we're gonna, you know, we're gonna go there, we're gonna get the hippo, and we're gonna leave. But it was just a lot easier to go into this DLC and hit exactly what you wanted without feeling like you had to conquer everything. And that was really nice from just a replayability perspective. So that was that's been the most enjoyable part. It's just experiencing it with different things, you know. But in general, I mean, I liked it. There's been a couple things that I think should have changed. But overall, I mean, I like the change to the lore we had with I think the NPC quests. I mean, I don't know, some people like it really obscure. I think they because in the base game, you know, NPCs you'd interact with one and then it's like they're gone. Okay, where did you go? And it felt like they were the pacing of the NPCs. It was a lot more straightforward this time, but I was able to find everyone playing through. I didn't feel like anything was insanely obscure. Exception of like the Trina quest. That one was a little bit weird in terms of the trigger. But we can talk about that later. But for the most part, I don't know. I loved the DLC. I thought it was great.
That's awesome.
I was just gonna say, I think Elden Ring, like if you're like ranking FromSoft and you are including Shadow of the Erdtree and part of Elden Ring, I think that puts it near the top of their catalog.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so fascinating because when I first went into the DLC, I thought that, you know, of course, like seeing a random NPC near the gate of where you fought Moog, I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. I never thought that, and just in case, anybody asks, yes, there will be spoilers, tons of spoilers. So if you have not played the DLC, please turn back where you came from, talk to the NPC that got you here, and start playing it. Because
I was debating. I already dropped Radon's name. I'm like, well, yeah, we have to put like a spoiler cast in the title or something for.
Yeah, and I'll be putting something in post-production, like at the very beginning as well, like, just make sure you guys have played it. Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, even if you post spoilers, people will be like, well, you shouldn't have said that. It's like, well, fuck around and find out, I guess. I don't know. Yeah,
it doesn't. There's always going to be somebody. I remember we were casually talking about Final Fantasy VII on stream like 3 years ago, and like where the story's going to go. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if Aerith's still going to die. And people are like, what do you mean Aerith's still going to die? And I'm like, dude, it's like a 20-year-old game. Like, if you were invested, you would have taken the opportunity to play it by now. Like, it's like being surprised that the Death Star gets blown up. Like, this has been established in media for a long time. The spoiler window is long since passed. Like, it's over.
Yeah, it's the same thing with a lot of Silent Hill games. I feel like, for the remake, if people are surprised about, James and, his wife getting killed, I'm pretty sure that's going to cause a few people with a ruckus. With what I found about the DLC, I found that it was not only incredibly beautiful, but the story of it was more fleshed out for the base game. I feel like when you got to even the part of Bale, like that story of the dragon just fleshes out everything from the first game. And, you see George R.R. Martin's influence fully like come to fruition, I feel like, in that DLC. But when it comes to a lot of the bosses, I feel like a lot of them really reminded me of the DLC of Dark Souls 1, just with a lot of the movesets and how they carried themselves, like the predictability of a lot of them. Even with Artorias, I saw a lot of those movesets in Radon, like with him flipping over and doing those like things several times in the beginning of his moveset. Yeah. The second one was chaotic. I just want to say, like, using Rot and using Bleed has been my best friend throughout that entire boss battle.
Yeah. Second phase Radon is definitely near the top of the FromSoft difficulty catalog, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like it doesn't come close to Millennia's River of Death, or what is it, River of Blood?
Millennia's River of Blood?
River of Blood? The slashing move?
You're thinking of Waterfowl.
Well, yeah, that's it. Never mind. That thing that
Rivers
she
of Blood
utilizes.
Is probably what was used to stop Waterfowl.
No, it's so interesting because like that's what reminded me of that, and I thought, wow, this is difficult, and there was some random that came into co-op with me, and that's what these Souls games are about. I feel like is the co-op, because when you get into this DLC, so many people were we were talking about this before about complaining about the difficulty level and saying that, oh, why is this so hard? And I'm thinking to myself, are people not collecting the Scout Tree blessings?
Yeah. I think a lot want it for sure.
Yeah, and like I ended off the game. I don't know what your level was at, but I ended off the game with 12 Scout Tree and I think 10 Ash blessings.
That's high. I mean, you can get up to 20, so finishing at 12 is pretty impressive. I think my first playthrough was probably like 18.9.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because they cap at 2010. First playthrough though, I mean, I didn't bother leveling my characters up anymore. I had them like already where I wanted them. First playthrough I did New Game Plus, and I had a character that had like hit stat caps on basically everything. So I just went in, I figured that way, whatever weapon I find, it doesn't matter, I can use it. And like every episode I was switching up to new stuff that I had found, so that was a lot of fun to do. And then subsequent playthroughs were level 200 characters. Like the walkthrough, I was just like a level 200 dex build, already set, not worried about stats at all. But so far, I mean, I've beaten it with pretty much every build at this point. I've done, Dex, Arcane, Strength, Faith. I just finished Int the other day. And so every build is able to tackle the DLC pretty easily.
Yeah, I was surprised at how well Faith actually did, because I respect and I made myself into an intelligence Faith build, and that knocked everything out of the park, because I was able to use the Oh, God, I forget certain characters' names at this point, but whenever it got to Romina, that boss right before you go and you break the shadow, it was so fascinating to me because when you get her remembrance, you can actually utilize that rot blessing that she has with Radon. And if you utilize that twice in a row, it sends his health down on top of using bleed. And I was using the thorn. What was it? The thorn spell that you can get right outside of Mesmer's Cast. Yeah. And you do that on top of one another and it completely destroys him. And I find it so cool because there are so many things that are so hard, like gnarly, I want to say. That's not the word I want to use, but it's so gnarly to see like all of these different spells and they haven't been nerfed and I don't think they are, which I think is great on From Software's part.
I'm surprised you were using the butterfly spell from her on Radon and wow. I have that's a spell that I have tried to use and I've not found luck with it so far. Just because usually like you need something to stand in those explosions. And it's like,
well, if you have your mimics here distracting Radon for you, I was and I was using that for like a couple of tries, but for like the final try of Radon, while someone was distracting him, I was using impenetrable thorns just over and over again, and that's what finally took him out.
That'll take him out. That's the one thing that got overlooked on the recent patch. I think that's going to get hit. I'll be very surprised if they let the damage of that ability stay where it's at.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially in PvP, because PvP people will just, I mean, if you get caught by one, it's doing all of your health in like a single hit.
That's what happened with me whenever I was in PvP. And what's surprising is that I got for the first time I got invaded in Elden Ring in the DLC.
Well, what part were you co-oping?
Oh god, I was at the final boss battle, and that it could have been
like at the fog.
Yep. So when it comes to the builds right now, I want to be able to discuss what builds you would best recommend for either a new player or a veteran coming in to the DLC right now, because we have a variance of builds, not only from the perfumes that you can utilize, but so many other spells and incantations that are now available on top of talismans. So from your time doing the walkthrough prep and everything, what would be your best suggestion for someone who's coming into the DLC?
I mean, honestly, I think just whatever you're going to have the most fun with, because everything has a pretty strong advantage in terms of what it's capable of. Like strength right now, you know, you're able to you could use Lion's Claw and effectively just stun lock the final boss. Like you're just knocking him down over and over to where he can't get up. With the Dex, I actually did closer to like a quality build, I guess, but I was using like the new Dex Claws, which are insane. They do like bleed. You can throw them, which makes them great to get some damage in if you're not right on top of your target. You obviously have Night Comet, which enemies the AI doesn't know how to handle that, so you're just pumping free damage. If you're going for Faith, you have access to just some of the craziest weapons in the game, stuff like Blasphemous Blade. Going for like a Faith Dex, you can get Wave of Gold with the Sacred Relic Sword, which trounces most of the DLC. Like any encounter that has more than 2 enemies, you're just like, everybody's dead. But I mean, out of everything, I'd say Int probably had the easiest time, only because enemy AI doesn't know how to deal with Night Comet. Besides that, the walkthrough build I used, it was mainly Dex, but I had enough strength to utilize a Great Shield. And I think, especially with the new deflecting hard tier, that like a Great Shield guard counter or in a build, I think it's very strong in the DLC at the moment, because you're able to block, and then do a huge counter. One of the new hard tiers, deflecting, it's the one, it's like if you time the block, like it's Sekiro basically, it builds up your guard counter, and so you can throw out guard counters that are hitting for like 4,000 to 5,000 damage, which you're massive damage, you're staggering the enemy, you're getting a free critical follow-up. So just an incredibly strong playstyle that's also very safe and very well protected from pretty much everything.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. It's good to know. I mean, especially with a lot of the shields, I feel like they came in with some really good ones for the DLC, especially the one that you can get from the Motherfinger for doing that little quest line. I feel like that one was really good. Like, so a lot of people had that finger shield, and it was just a brick. You could just like go. Shield? Yeah, there was this one finger shield that I think you could get it from the area in which you were like blowing the whistles in the in the fingers for that quest line in Manus Cathedral.
Man, I'm not familiar with a finger shield.
Yeah,
Talking about the shield of night. Is it the little one?
No, it's like this big honking boulder looking shield.
Are you talking fingerprint shield?
Yes.
Oh, that's base game.
Oh, that's a base game. I thought it was a DLC because I saw everyone using it for the final boss.
No. That's a base game. It's that's tied to the Frenzy Flame quest, but it's pretty tricky to find. As you're making your way into the sewers, you go past a series of insanely tricky drops, and as you're making your way down, you can pick it up. It's basically just like the heaviest shield in the game. It's very solid. I was a fan of it in the base game a lot. They ended up hitting it with a little bit of a nerf because it outclassed every other shield in the game. It's still good, obviously, but I think there's better shields now. Like Holly Tree Crest has pretty comparable stats. The guard boost is just slightly lower, but it weighs like 10 less units, which is huge because Fingerprint I think weighs close to 30. But one of the big ones for me, the new the Black Knight Grade shield you can get in the DLC, that actually, if you holy infuse that hits 100 holy, 95 physical, which is basically designed to counter Radahn at the end.
Wow, that's insane.
You're mitigating all of his damage, yeah.
Wow, yeah, it's amazing just what one shield can do. I saw people doing like these insane runs with shield only, and you were basically stun locking and obliterating a boss with a shield. If you infuse it and you do it the right way, you can just do that and it makes sense. But what I found was really interesting during my time with the DLC was when I would go in, let's say to Mesmer, for example, how easy it is to know when he has very well telegraphed movesets, but how easy it is to dodge so many of his attacks and get a counterattack.
Yeah, Mesmer, I think it is actually almost easier unlocked even, because just fighting him, I think the hardest part of that fight is when you're playing locked on, there's a lot of attacks where you'll dodge, but your camera will like immediately reorient straight up and not get you out of the way. Like when he starts, jumping around and stuff, if you're just unlocked and dodging through, you can, it's not unlike the Millennia fight in the sense that if like unlocked, you can dodge once through Waterfowl and she'll like whiff the entire second portion of the attack. Because it's the game's reliant on you being locked on, being in a certain position for that to track properly. And Mesmer kind of follows the same flow of like being able to dodge through his stuff if you're unlocked. But if you're playing locked on, which I think a lot of people are conditioned to do, you dodge one and then you like look up and then you're like, where's the boss at? And he's coming down on top of you. So I think that's another point of struggle a lot of people had.
Yeah, and I think that's also a thing with Radahn as well, because that one phase, part of his phase in the second part where he just disappears, that took me off guard, and I was like, where the fuck did this dude go?
Oh
like,
yeah, coming back in with Comet round 2, yeah.
I feel like he's just pissed off at us for beating him with patches, and I don't feel like it's fair, because like he comes in and he's trying to be holier than thou with that horse of his, and then he's like, oh no, surprise, I'm back. It's like, okay, fine, fuck off.
Well, so I think and I've noticed this in the various Mesmer kills, he has a couple of like really cool attacks, but the way that phase 2 is approached, you get him down to about a third of his health and he's going to transition. And right after that, he does that big slam. And as long as you dodge that, you can pump a lot of damage. And so a lot of the times I was fighting him, he wasn't even utilizing the full moveset. You'd see like maybe one snake come out that you dodge, but like he actually has like a snake combo attack type thing where there's just it's gonna be like 3 or 4 snakes in a row that come rushing at you. That's really cool to see happen. But I think out of the various playthroughs I just did, I think I saw that attack maybe once or twice, just because phase 2 in that fight progresses so fast. He doesn't get to really utilize his full moveset a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like if you're a well-prepared player and you understand like the moveset of the character even before going and like just even seeing him, because one thing I try to tell people is that die a few times in the game when you're in that boss, so you can just see what his moveset is or what, you know, they're doing within the boss arena, so you can get an idea. And then once you get an idea of it, you'll be able to like take it on no problem. But I just want to make people aware, by the way, because I was seeing this a lot on Twitter. Just because we criticize something, or if we're saying something that we don't necessarily like about the DLC, doesn't mean we don't like the DLC. I just want to clarify that, because sometimes people get confused and think that, you know, oh, they must have not liked it if they're like critiquing it or something. It's like, no, we can critique things that we like. So
yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of critiquing.
Yeah, exactly. As long as, you know, people aren't being dicks about it, you know, you can, you know, critique it and understand something that is beneficial to say about a game, you know, and respecting it. But one thing I want to go into now is some of the questions that we got from the tweet. I'll post it again up here. It'll be somewhere in the video in post-production, where I asked you guys for some questions that you wanted to ask us in the podcast and get more of an insight into. And I have actually one of my first questions. It's like a personal question that I have for you, actually. And in all the times that we've been doing the podcast, I never thought to ask it until now. But what got you into doing the walkthroughs as intensely as you do them now?
Just I saw a need, and it wasn't being done. When I started, I was doing, you know, gameplay walkthrough, because that's the SEO term that Google seems to like. And I read a lot of comments, and back then a lot of people were like, this isn't a walkthrough. And, you know, everyone that does that gets those, but it really bothered me, because I'm like, you know, they're right, it's not a walkthrough. Like, why am I just like, everyone does it, but like, it's not a walkthrough. Why am I doing this? And so I was like, you know what, let me just, you know, I was thinking back to when I was a kid. I remember I was playing, I don't remember which one. It was one of the Pokemon games. I was young. I was maybe 8 or 9, but I was on vacation, and there was some boulder puzzle that I couldn't figure out. And I remember my mom had to go shopping, and I tagged along, and we were at like Walmart, and I broke away to go to the game section and find the guide and flip open to that puzzle and figure out what I had to do to solve it. And I thought back to that about, like, you know, like actually needing a guide. And, you know, I mean, some of that stuff's still around, but you don't really, like, you know, we don't see a lot of like strong guided content these days like we used to. And I was like, you know, maybe I should just do this, like actually take all the notes, figure out where all the loot is, figure out boss strategies, and just make a proper guide to take people through these games. And then it just clicked, and it took off. And then, you know, fast forward years later, and I'm still doing it. So
how does it feel to be like probably one of the, you know, main sources that people go to for like Bloodborne and Elden Ring? I know that's how I found your content, was the Bloodborne walkthrough.
I mean, it's a nice feeling, you know. I like helping people. My day job is usability, which is just, you know, adapting, helping to adapt the system more to the end user. So I think of the walkthroughs in a sense as an extension of that. You're just looking at the product and thinking, okay, you know, how can we inform players to adapt to this so that, you know, the most common denominator can tackle this content and get through it without frustration. And so that's just a really fun thing to be able to do.
That's awesome, though. And like the opportunities that you've been able to get, you know, because of that, and like companies have been able to see that passion for the walkthroughs and the work that you've been able to put into it. So, you know, I know it sounds cheesy to say, and I know you've, you know, seen me say it to you before on Twitter, but truly thank you for the work that you do on the walkthroughs.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So let's get into some of the questions that were sent over. We got some good ones too, actually. I was really happy with the response. So the first question, if it'll come up, that I want to go into is from Sergeant Meow, and she asks, is it possible to have both a strength build and a magic build that is equally as powerful as one or the other? You go first.
So obviously this is going to depend on your rune level, but I would say yes, depending on what you're trying to do. So let me pull up a build calculator. So the thing with like with a strength magic build is usually you're going to be trying to, you know, do a spell sword, if you will. So like, for example, I want 60 vigor. Mine, you're going to want at least 20 endurance. We'll say 30. Strength, probably like 54. Intelligence, we could go up to 80. Dex is at 13. Right now, that's 194. So at 194, you'd be hitting the 80 strength cap when two-handing your weapon while also having intelligence at 80. If you leave Dex at base, you could even pump your mind up to like 26. So yeah, right there you'd be able to essentially hit like the peak of what strength is capable of, while also hitting the strongest spells in the game. But you are making some minor sacrifices, you know. So with like a pure caster, 26 mind is definitely on the low end. Like you're going to be able to cast your spells, but you're going to be chugging those flasks more often. So you're going to have less FP than a full caster. And for me, at least, when I play strength builds, I go very heavy into endurance. You know, I'm usually going beyond 40 in some cases because I'm like, I want my poise hitting over 100. I want massive amounts of poise. I also want to use a Colossus weapon. And, you know, just those numbers, you need tons and tons of endurance to support it. So you're going to be a little bit lighter on armor. You're not going to have quite as much juice to cast with. And then the other downside is, you know, both those builds generally would require very different talismans. Like, you know, if you're going casting focused, you might go something like Radigan Icon or Godfrey Icon or Graven Mass Talisman. Whereas if you're going strength, you might go more for, you know, the charged attack talisman, the axe, or you might go for a stamina boost, or more than likely you're going to be running something that's going to increase your equipment load. And so, from a technical perspective, yes, you can do it, but it usually requires a little bit more fine tuning because you gotta balance on that line between, you know, I have my int high enough that I could be a pure caster dumping out crazy spells, but if I'm doing that, I'm not going to have the things that really let strength become like Unga Bunga. So it's usually more of a fusion where you end up having like a spell sword type build, and they're really fun. I've done a couple of them. But, you know, you have to be willing to make sacrifices somewhere, whether it's going to be, you know, you're casting your armor or you know, leaning your talismans more in one direction or the other.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also I would like to add to that, different swords that you can use are also going to be kind of sort of limited. If you have a high dex added on to that, it's possible. But there was a sword that I would highly recommend maxing out entirely is the Dark Moon Greatsword that you can get from Brownie's questline. And it's probably one of the best swords that are in the game. It was kind of nerfed, you know, before, but it still has a lot of power, especially when you amp it up and use its ultimate, quote unquote. It's really good. It does a lot of strength stuff, but it also has the magic that's necessary. And that's what I used primarily through the entire DLC for the most part. That and Rykard's Blasphemous Blade at the very end for certain like mini bosses. So I would highly recommend that Rykard's Blade or the Moonveil Katana for a strength and magic build, because that will absolutely obliterate everything.
Well, Moonveil is going to be Dex magic. Moonveil won't.
Oh, that would be Dex magic. Okay.
Yeah, Moonveil goes Dexterity B, I believe it is.
Okay.
For strength magic, your big ones. So. Let's see.
Oh, so Sword of Night and Flame could possibly be one of them. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, Night and Flame, that would be that's more fundamentalist because you need balanced int and faith for that. So the Dark Moon Greatsword, that's actually more of a pure int than int strength. Like, you know, a lot of people see it and they think like, oh, strength build, but it's actually only descaling in strength. You get B and int. So for a strength caster build, you're more likely going to go for things like Carrying Night Sword, Falling Beast Jaw, or Falling Beast. Let me see. Falling Beast is, I think that's the one I used on my one. Let me see what that leveled up into. Yeah, so that goes CCD when it's leveled up, but it has a fair amount of magic and standard, and your Ash of War does gravity, so that's a pretty nice one for like a strength type mage. Let me go. I'm just looking through some of the things. I mean, the weapons themselves are a little more on the disappointing, and I don't want to say disappointing, but like your Moonthrithl swords, like those get good on strength dex, but I think there's better great swords. But like Moonthril's Night Sword, Troll's Night Sword, all that stuff very much falls into that bucket. Royal Greatsword, you know, they're designed for strength in. But at the end of the day, you could always just, you know, you could even take regular Greatsword and put it towards cold, and that's going to split your scaling between strength and intelligence, and that usually works pretty well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and actually, before I forget, there are some staffs that are pretty good. If you like, especially like for the question that was asked, if you can go either way with like strength or intelligence. One of the staffs that I would use, I know it's like a base one that everyone uses, but and the one that actually comes with being an astrologer, but the astrologer staff, when maxed out, is really, really powerful. The other one that I would really recommend, I saw it over here, was either Azur's Glintstone staff or the Prince of Death staff, which the Prince of Death staff, in order to unlock everything you need in a high intelligence and faith of both 80. So that is, something to note as well.
Yeah, Prince of Death, you're going to go Prince of Death falls into that fundamentalist bucket. The thing with fundamentalist builds is you're really not going to have any strength or dex for them, because like even at 200 you can hit at RL 200 you can barely hit 60-60. If you're going up to 80-80, Prince of Death is going to outclass, but at the same time you're going to be leaving the meta, so you're not going to really be getting much in terms of PvP at that point.
Interesting. Okay.
If you're strictly focusing intelligence, I'd say the best staff in the game is going to always be Carrion Regal Scepter. You can get more damage out of using Lusats, but Lusats has a increased FP requirement. And since your mind is already going to be limited, if you're using Lusats, you're going to be burning through your FP. It's a 50% increase, so that burns away very quick for the damage. Azure, I would actually disagree on Azure. I would not recommend Azure, because Azure, you're spending 20% extra FP for a 8% increase in casting speed, which is
there's kind of give and take on that one. Yeah,
I would say it's an imbalanced relationship there, because at 8%, I mean, you could run a Radigan icon and you're getting more value out of a single talisman slot and not spending 20% more of your FP. But yeah, if you're going 80, Carrion Regal Scepter is pretty much always going to be the safest bet. Another thing to keep in mind is you can get damage boosts with staff in the offhand. So if you're casting invisibility spells, even if you're using Carrion Regal Scepter, you could have Staff of Loss in an offhand, and the invisibility spells will receive that damage buff. So I usually use Carrion Regal Scepter, but if I have a heavy focus, like, if I have, 3 invisibility spells in my lineup, I might keep a Staff of Loss in the offhand just to toss on when I'm focused on those spells to get the extra damage out. But I think that also falls more into like a pure caster bucket, because, if you're trying to work strength in, you're probably not going to have the extra equipment load to start slapping on all these other various staffs.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's like excuse my lack of knowledge whenever it comes to like the specifics and everything like that. Whenever I see certain tools and weapons that are utilized, I think, oh, okay, this does a certain thing. It must be strictly for like magic or or dex or anything like that. So whenever I see certain stuff, I don't think, oh, this must be a fundamentalist build. So I never even heard it put that way before. So that's something new to learn.
Yeah, the term, there's not really a concrete agreed upon term for split faith in, whereas like, quality has been referred to since the beginning for strength dex, because that's what it was called in Demon Souls, is quality. But faith and intelligence dual scaling, I mean, I've called it hybrid before. The fundamentalist term mainly comes because all of the fundamentalist school incantations level jointly on intelligence and faith, and there's a lot of different sorceries that do that. The death sorceries are going to level jointly. The magma sorceries are going to level jointly. The thorn stuff, you primarily need faith for it, faith and arcane, but you still need enough int to cast. So there's like a lot of different stuff in that area, but it also doesn't make sense to be like, oh yeah, it's a death build, because then it's like, well, are you referring to Deathblight? Or, oh, it's a magma build, like, are you referring to the blades? Whereas, fundamentalist always means in faith. So I think that's why that term has received more adoption.
Okay, so technically when I was telling you about what I respect my build to, for example, intelligence and faith, that would be a fundamentalist build.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, all right, the more you learn, because I had no idea about that. That's actually good to know. So for the next question that we have right over here, this comes from, if I can read their name, is SPerbs on Twitter, and they ask, what direction would you like From Software to take for their next game, sequel or original? You go first.
Original. I think FromSoft always does their best work when they're given creative freedom with IPs. You know, like we saw Dark Souls, and then Dark Souls 2 came out via the B team, but they went off and they did Bloodborne, which was super cool. And then, you know, they came back to do Dark Souls 3 for us, which felt familiar, and then they instead did Sekiro, which was wild. And then, you know, we got Elden Ring, which was obviously very, very familiar with the Souls influence, but still with a lot of changes and things that separate it from what makes the Souls games what they are. And just, you know, looking at that evolution, if we consider like, we call it the Dark Souls pipeline, but looking like Dark Souls into Bloodborne, into Sekiro, in Elden Ring, I think that evolution of the medium they have shown has led to more interesting things compared to Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3. I just think they do their best work when they're told, like, you know, do what you want.
Yeah, the creative freedom lends to a lot of really amazing things to happen. Yeah. I really like that. And, you know, the thing is with the original stuff, which I agree too. I mean, like doing something original will lend for something really awesome to happen. I mean, we got Elden Ring when that happened. So I think that it's, you know, it's worth giving the team something to do something original instead of doing like a sequel. Even the DLC, part of me doesn't think that there's going to be any more Elden Ring after that realistically. Even though I still think there's always more story to cover. Yeah. But doing something original, I would love for them to see doing a kind of their own version of a Code Vein inspired world, because something with vampires and something that's Souls-like just appeals to me on a very interesting level. So I think that would be interesting to see from them, you know, regardless. I mean, like if you had like the builds of Bloodborne combined with the attack styles of Sekiro and vampires, gold. That would be amazing. So let's go over to the next question, which comes from Lexa Blackheart. And this actually is more of a question for you. How has your life changed and been affected by becoming such a prominent figure within the Soulsborne community?
I mean, in terms of like my general day-to-day life, I guess not much. Obviously, I spend a lot more time, you know, making videos these days, and you know, going through trying to check all my stuff, double check it. But otherwise, not much. I don't think it's really changed like how I present myself. I think I'm just as much of an asshole now as I was back when I started. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's funny. It's funny. I always say like, you know, change questions, because I get, you know, we were talking about trolls before the podcast, because you were having some problems with some assholes, and occasionally I'll get somebody and they're like, oh, you know, you let Dark Souls go to your head. You've changed so much, and I'm like, go watch a stream from like 7 years ago, and If anything, I would say, not that Souls has changed me, but I think having kids has mellowed me out compared to, I used to be a lot more abrasive and edgy, I think.
I was about to say, yeah, your stuff from like years ago is a lot more like, you were like, oh my God, yeah, let's go, let's do this. Now you're like, hey, what's up, guys? You know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, kids will, I mean, I don't know anybody that gains more energy after having children, to be fair. I think that's going to mellow pretty much everyone out. But yeah, I don't know if it's really changed my life in terms of how I make content that much. I think more the opposite. I think the things that have happened in life have more influenced how I approach content versus the other way around.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So yeah, more of like the life experiences that you've had, like, you know, yeah, versus what you're doing with content. That's actually pretty cool. Yeah, I like that answer. That's really awesome. And now for the final question, which is for both of us, what is the most, and this is from Gembox360, what is the most difficult boss for both of you, one that took a lot of tries to kill? You go first.
So are we talking in all of Souls or just DLC?
I would say all of Souls. Make it fair.
So all of Souls would probably be the first time I beat Nameless King. So it was coming. So I really got into Souls heavy with Dark Souls 2. And so Dark Souls 3, I obviously went in with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. Like, I know what I'm doing now. I'm a Souls guy. I can do this. And, those are the most dangerous times because that's when you forget the basics. And Nameless King, I proceeded to it was like just trying to break a brick wall down with your head. I just kept getting up and slamming and slamming and slamming. And I got him after, I think it was like 3 hours of attempts. And in retrospect, looking, whereas like by comparison, I'd say the hardest boss in the DLC for me at least was Radahn. But going in, within 2 attempts, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of holy damage coming out. Let me help mitigate that. And I was switching up talismans. I was going to a different shield. Whereas in Nameless King, the idea of just pulling out a shield that helps mitigate lightning, that wasn't clicking in my brain. I was just like, no, his attack's bullshit. I need dodge better to avoid the bullshit. and I insisted on brute forcing it versus adapting, which really inflated the difficulty of that challenge for me.
Literally the definition of work smarter, not harder.
Yeah, I refused at the time.
I think it's a toss-up for me between Orphan of Kos, which almost took me a week, not even exaggerating on that. It was very difficult for me at first because I went immediately from Dark Souls 1 to then playing, what was it? I think it was either Sekiro or Bloodborne I went into after that. It was Sekiro. I went in after Dark Souls. I went into Sekiro and then Bloodborne. And Bloodborne was one hell of a roller coaster because I went in and I thought, oh yeah, no, this is great. I've beat Father Gascoigne. I'm getting all these, bosses down. And I had a bit of an ego with me when I went into fighting Orphan of Kos, and I got obliterated by the placenta sac. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is going to take some time. But it's a toss up because Plasto, that's how you pronounce your name? The Plasto?
Plasto?
No, placenta sacs. Holy shit.
I was like, I don't know. I was like, you've been saying some shit this stream. It's like, yeah, the finger wiggler shield. I'm like, what? Yeah, the move my favorite strength weapon, and Plaso. I'm like, what the fuck is she?
Fucking Plaso.
She was taking some drugs before this one kicked off. She's all over the place today.
Fucking Placido Domingo is the boss right now. Jesus Christ.
Sex, yes.
Whatever the fuck that guy's name is. That dragon was hard as shit, though. Seriously. I just recently beat him, too.
He'll always be my favorite. He'll always be my favorite, only because I was the first confirmed discovery of him in the world.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. And that was the one where, it was when they sent you the code and they were like, okay, you have literally no one to talk to about it because no one's gotten to that area yet.
Well,
so
at that point, nobody, because we knew he existed because of the trophy. And no one had found him yet. To be fair, I had the game obviously early. So it was it was very early after launch, and I was doing streams on the Let's Play character, trying to find remaining secrets that I had missed, and wandering down. And the whole stream was just like, where is this Placido Sex? Where is this guy? And finally finding that was such an insane moment. Just because there was nothing. You could Google online, and the only thing that was showing up was trophy Placido Sex. There was a trophy for this, and it's like, well, no, information. Give me information. So discovering that will forever make him. It'll put him ahead of other dragons for me.
Because it's I think when it comes to difficulties of bosses, it was weird for me because going in, the very first Souls game I ever played was Dark Souls Remastered in 2021. And then you see that difficulty spike from Dark Souls, then all the way to Sekiro, and then Bloodborne. Yeah. And it's like...
It's crazy when you look at what dragon fights looked like in Dark Souls 1.
Oh my gosh.
Compared to what dragon fights... watch a video of Calamite compared to Bale, and it's like a different world with what you're looking at.
Oh my God, Bale! That fight is absolutely incredible, though. I have yet to beat it.
Cinema.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is. It's like, curse you, Bale.
Yeah,
It's so
Egon's voice acting is phenomenal. Honestly, anybody that doesn't summon Egon for that fight is having a worst experience.
Like, yeah, it makes it so much better.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. It's like he just elevates the entire thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this DLC this time around is that the voice acting and just the acting in general from everything is so much better than the base game. I looked at it, and Lita, which we'll get into this in a second, but the voice acting of Lita when you get in is so interesting, and I feel like almost, and this is where I'm going to critique the DLC a little bit, a letdown, because you build her character up so much, and then you see her boss battle with whichever NPC you kind of pissed off at the end, and it was just a disappointment for me. I don't know how you felt about that, or which NPC was there fighting you.
So I have two very different experiences here. The first time I was trying to do everything I could, but I missed the summon signs to get help. So my first time battling Lita, I battled Lita, Freya, Hornsent, Moore, and Dane. So it was a 1v5.
Oh no.
And it was wild. And just me and Mimic fighting for our life. The second time, which was like walkthrough, prep and walkthrough, I was properly prepared and I had closed out all the side quests, and it was a very, very different experience because instead it was, I don't even know if Freya joined the fight. Did Freya join the fight? Freya might have. It would have been like, I don't know, basically most of the fight was like a 5v1 because it was me, it was Mimic, it was Ansbach, it was Tiolier, and then the way those summons were coming in, it was staggered. So it was like Dane came out, got bodied. I think when the game went, it might have gone Freya, Dane, and her. But the way they were coming out, they were constantly outnumbered. So it was just like they would spawn and die. They would spawn and die. They would spawn and die. So it was a very, very different experience from the first time doing it.
Interesting. Yeah, the first time I did
cars
it.
Were stacked. Yeah.
That's so strange to me because it's like, I feel like that is truly going to be one of the variants for everyone who's experiencing that. Because people who, necessarily, I mean, in all honesty, if you know by now, you should probably like already know that you have like side quests and everything that you have to complete with these guys. But when it came to my time playing it, I fought against Dryleaf and her, and that was it.
Yeah, that might have been it. Cause I'm trying to remember. I don't know if I don't think Freya showed up at the end. I'd have to go back. It's honestly, I've played so much Shadow of the Erdtree in the last month that it's just like a blur of side quests and whatnot at this point. But I think you can get her because her dialogue will change. I think she just said like, me and my ally Dryleaf Dane, and I'm like, oh, there's two of you? You're about to get ruined.
Dryleaf Dane, he kept stun locking me. That was so weird. It was so strange to me because it's like he does that rapid fire kick, and it's like, you have got to be fucking with me right now.
Yeah, no, he'll mess you up if you don't get off of him. Lita's little Ash of War can do a lot of damage if you're not ready for it either. That can chunk you for about half your health.
Yeah,
I didn't mind that fight. Because the thing is, I think back to like Dark Souls 2 and the 1v3 brawl where you're fighting against like the Havel monster and the spear thing, and that fight will forever be infuriating. Just because it's like, here's 3 of the most cringe PvP builds you'll ever encounter, and you're going to fight all of them at the same time. And this had similar vibes, but if you like prepped for it, it was your turn to bully all the NPCs. And the other thing is, I like how, if you're just blowing them up, it does, you're kind of like, all right, you're down. Okay, next one, you're down. But like, if you're trading blows and going back and forth, like eventually that fight turns into like a full-on battle royale, of like, a 4-man versus a 4-man, which is pretty cool when you think about it, because we don't really see stuff like that on the PvE side of From Software.
No, we don't. And that, it's an interesting way to look at it, because at first when I was dealing with that fight right before Radon, I was thinking to myself, that was very interesting, but also kind of like meh in a way, because I expected more from Leda, especially after that humongous betrayal that we were given by her character. It was really interesting to see because I feel like they left the grand finale for like an actual grand finale. Because when everyone looks at the storyline, they're going to think, oh, wow, Mikola wants peace and everything. And this is, just like a segue to get into the story a little bit of where, Mikola wants peace and he wants everyone to get along. And I had such like an uneasy feeling, excuse me, when I was playing the game, that it's like, okay, this is a little bit kind of dictatorial, if you will, because you don't actually have free will. Like a lot of the people like Hornsent or people who were really like passionate about something, those people were fought against. And if you have people who are like kind of, all right, I don't know what to believe, or I'm just here, for the ride, or I'm just will follow anything that sounds good, those are the ones that are fighting with Mikola. And he wants to try to create that world of like, well, I'm going to force this love onto everyone. And it's like, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, Mikola is. I think that the funniest part of the DLC was just the revelation. For the longest time, everyone dunked on Moog, called him Moog Lester, and all sorts of other shit. And then all along, we find out that he was basically brainwashed by Mikola. You're just like, oof. How are you an apology, sir? But it's the DLC does. I think they could have closed it out a little bit better. One of my only story complaints is you get to the end, and then you have that little cutscene of him just being like, promise me you'll be my consort. After we've heard him say the same line like 4 or 5 times, I would have liked a little bit more there. I also think kind of a weird design choice. So we had the trailer where Millennia. Like you see a Millennia whispering to Radahn, your consort awaits you. I'm surprised they didn't include that as like an opening scene when you first go into the DLC or something. It was just in the trailers, and I think that was a little bit of a missed opportunity because, why not? Just when we touch the hand, play that cutscene because why not? It's cool. Show it to us. Give it
exactly.
To us,
The same with Leda as well, because I feel like we were kind of misled with the character design of Leda, because, we were shown this kind of, I want to say like more grandiose cutscene of her, which led me to believe like, oh, we're actually going to have like a full on boss battle potentially with her. And then it turned into a PvP and I was like, wait a second, what's going on here?
Yeah, she definitely goes basically just psychopath at the end. And it gets a little, once the seal breaks, she's like, oh, time to find out who's not pure. We're going to kill them all.
Yeah.
You follow her. She's like, Hornsent, kill him. Ansvat, kill him. Just like, and then you get to the end. She's like, you're next. Like, okay, lady, calm down.
Lord, nobody's next.
Yeah.
So one of the next topics I want to go into is the things that you hope to see from other patches and things going in, because they had their huge patch that just recently came out. What do you expect next in terms of patches?
I would think a lot of spells are probably going to get adjusted. There are a couple that are underperforming and a couple that are overperforming. Probably the most egregious is the Rain of Fire, because when you're running over towards Salza, you're like, it's not terrifying, but you're like, oh, this hurts if it hits. And then you get the spell and you try it, and it's like, wow, this is not worth the FP I spent to even cast it. Like, even if someone stands still in it, it's doing nothing. So there's definitely a few spells that I think need to get touched up and patched. I think we're going to see some more balance. Thorns, I would be incredibly surprised if that doesn't get toned down, just because the damage and the bleed and the multi-hit all pulled together is just way too high. I think we might see a twofold patch on that. Like, they'll probably put on the damage, but also increase the health cost to help dissuade people from spamming it. Because I think it's cool to have like a Thorn spell that nukes, but the problem is, like, oh, it's going to hurt you when you do it, but like you can kill a boss before you've even lost a quarter of your health. So I think if they jump the health cost of it up to like, 300 or something, to where you need to be, you're using that twice and then you're backing off to get a heal, because that hits, you've chunked the boss for more than a quarter of his health. I think that'll make it a bit more balanced. There were some changes that were pre-launch that were a little weird. Namely, the Scriptsmith weapons got a really big nerf, and that applied to both PvE and PvP. But I'd hope to see some of that's reverted partially, because like the pre-launch Scriptsmith were one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in a Souls game. You know, because it's especially like the hammer. Like the hammer, I was throwing out for, you know, given this is with Shadow Tree buffs, but I was hitting for like 4K on a fully charged hammer throw, and it felt so good to actually chuck out this big Thor's hammer and hit for that kind of damage. And then, you know, we get to the day one patch and that's been cut like to a quarter of what it was. And it's like, oh no. Yeah, the same thing happened to Mesmer Spear. Mesmer Spear, a quick throw of Mesmer Spear was hitting for about 800 pre-launch, and then post-launch is hitting for like 250-ish. So there's a lot of things that I feel like they saw how strong they were, and the nerfs felt, I would almost say reactionary in nature, because they definitely felt a little heavy-handed. So I'd hope to see some of that stuff get rolled back. But, you know, at the point we're at now, I think just, you know, general balance stuff like that is going to be the most important thing moving forward.
Yeah, what did you think of, and I know that this was kind of I don't want to say a struggle, but I saw how kind of like, you know, momentarily frustrated you were whenever you had to redo the entire walkthrough.
Yeah,
You want to talk about that a little bit?
More than anything, that was just surprising, because, you know, like in this industry, day one patches are always a thing, but for the most part, day one patches are going to be finalization, bug fixes, you know, and there was a fair amount of that, but there were also like really weird sweeping loot changes, like, you know, a random piece of loot as you're running down a cliff that used to be prism stones, now it's like hawk feathers, and it's like, why was this changed? Like it's such, you know, like some of the stuff I get, like the adding the hammer as the first drop, because that was bugged and they had to fix that, because the hammer at launch you could not get the Black Knight Great Hammer. It just didn't drop. You had 2 knights that would drop the shield instead. And then they updated a bunch of spell icons, which was a little weird. In some cases, I think the older icons actually looked better, and then they like changed the art on them, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I think I liked how this looked before, but you know, whatever. But yeah, that was not fun. I had 16 episodes of the walkthrough already recorded before. That was a rough band-aid to pull off, because I was like, because when I started re-uploading it, I was like, you know, what do? Do I leave these up? And I'm like, I just got to delete them. And people were like, what happened to the walkthrough? And I'm like, I'm having to redo it. And they're like, where are my episodes? And I'm like, I'm having to redo it. So that was not it was a very stressful week, but we're past it. Walkthrough's done. Everything is relaxation now.
That's going to be kind of like your version of Cyberpunk, whenever you, like, we saw that they had to delay it, and we just have that forever yellow banner ingrained in our mind right now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that has to be rough though. I mean, like, because you're posting content and you do this like on a daily basis. So having to redo that much content, I can't even imagine like how stressful that have to have been, you know?
Yeah, it was about 20 hours of work just thrown out, roughly.
Jeez, man.
You know,
but yeah, I mean, like,
you gotta do it. Sometimes you gotta do it.
I do have to ask though, like, whenever people, you know, and this is just like a side question, you know, but whenever people get kind of demanding and everything like that, is that something that surprises you, or is it something of where it's just like, oh, you know, it comes with content creation, you kind of expect it now?
I wouldn't say it's surprising, because I think we live in a time where we live in a very much on-demand society from an overarching perspective, especially those of us that are in the US, you know, like you can go online, click something, and Amazon can have it to your house the same day. We have endless amounts of on-demand content via YouTube and streaming apps. And so the entitlement, I guess you could say, it doesn't surprise me, but that doesn't stop it from disgusting me at times. Like there were quite a few people I was outright like, you know, I had a couple people that were like, you know, I paid for this membership and you're deleting stuff and redoing it. That's unacceptable. And I'm like, leave. I don't need your money. I don't need your viewership. Fuck off.
Yeah, good. It's not it's not worth the headache of that, because when people get to that level of entitlement of saying, well, like literally throwing that concept of money in your face, it almost becomes demeaning at sorts of where it's like, I don't need your money if you're going to act like a dick. Like, no.
Well, and even on the flip side, like there were some people. So for the last, I don't know, maybe a year since YouTube implemented early access for members, you know, because I'll prep content up. Like right now, I'm working on 9 Souls. I have 6 episodes done so far, and those are episodes that drop between like today and Sunday, and I'll plan on getting more done like today and on the weekend. And you know, I'll get a series done. I'll release it 2 episodes a day, and then that usually takes me up to like the next big game that I'm going to cover. And so one of the things I did was I didn't have a good perk for tier 2 members, and they added early access to episodes. So I can make it's like, hey, tier 2 members are able to just, if it's done and uploaded, you can view it early. Everyone else still gets the daily episodes, the same as I've done for like the last 10 years. And I had a lot of people that were like, you know, no, that's unacceptable. You're pay gating the content. And I'm like, no, like, you know, nothing has changed. You're still getting, you know, like there was one person that pissed me off, and I was like, you know, like this was as I was redoing the walkthrough, and at the time, my daily upload would include a let's play at 8 a.m., a walkthrough part at 10 a.m., a let's play at noon, a build video at 2 p.m., and another let's play at 4 p.m. And someone was like, they're like, you know, it's unacceptable that it's, you know, scummy and blah, blah, blah. You're pay gating your content. And I'm like, dude, I'm dropping 5 fucking pieces of content per day. And this is on top of doing the like 3 to 4 hours stream for walkthrough prep for that day. All of this is publicly available, and you're upset that you can't have the entire walkthrough right now. Like, eat the biggest bag of dicks. I do not care. Fuck off.
That is such a level of entitlement that
it's insane to me. Yeah, I'm just like,
wow, that's
like shocking.
Yeah, like I had to like, you know, close the mouth for a second. You know, it's kind of like one of those moments of where it's like I don't think people understand like how they come off, because it's like we're not robots, we're literally just people doing what we love. And that's the thing, like you also have a quote unquote day job in addition to what you're doing, so you could easily do something else if you wanted to, but you choose to be here, you choose to do this. And that's what people don't get, is that this is a choice where, you know, you're doing what you love because you want to be able to provide something that you said was missing in the community. You're providing a service. And I don't think, you know, if people tried to do it on their own, I honestly think that probably 90%, even more so, probably 98% of the people who bash and complain at what you're doing, they probably would not be able to do what you're doing because it takes so much work.
Well, it's just crazy to me. It's just the the expectation, I guess, from some people that are like, why if somebody else, you know, they see somebody else gets access to it, and then to them it's unfair that they don't have access. And it's like, you know, don't mind the fact that, you know, if you come back tomorrow, the next episode would be free. That doesn't care. That doesn't matter to them. It's the fact that somebody else was able to pay for the privilege of watching it early, and they're like, that's not fair, I deserve it now.
It's literally the same thing as if you get sent a game key early. It's the same concept as well.
It's the same thing as like, you know, it's like watching anime for free on Crunchyroll and then being upset that the paying subscribers get to watch the episodes day one. Like, dude, if it's free for you, if you just wait, like go outside, touch some grass, come back tomorrow, it'll be here for you.
Yeah. Like I see you get, by the way, the most ridiculous comments on Twitter sometime of where like you were literally, by the way, asking, I think it was a few days ago or a day or so ago, about help for Black Myth Wukong. And someone was underneath your comments saying, maybe just wait and buy it. And I'm thinking to myself, you dingle fuck, like seriously?
Yeah, I can't.
What?
Yeah, some people they just don't.
Yeah, it's so funny to me because like I started posting more regular like Souls and content that's like lore driven besides some of the playthroughs that I do. And one person underneath a video I did where I said Dark Souls 1 and Elden Ring are connected because of the use of Manus within the map of the game, and they were like, this has to be the most what was it? No, the cringe is palpable. And it was because I was overly excited about what I was doing. Like, oh, excuse me for being happy about the work and content that I do. Sorry.
Yeah, people spend too much time wanting to be negative on the internet these days, for sure.
They think it gets them somewhere, and they think it just gets them attention and clout. And it's like, you know what? You have the biggest wedgie probably I have ever seen in my life.
Just all up in the asshole.
Like perpetual wedgie. Like, my God, it's so funny. But yeah, to do one of the next topics that I wanted to get into was weapons. Now, when it comes to weapons in the DLC, we have some really heavy hitters, no pun intended. What is one weapon that when you're going into the DLC, depending on the build, what would you recommend for people? Like, for example, someone's going in with a strength dex build, which is a very kind of balanced out build, I would say. What would you
quality,
not okay, dex, fine, quality.
Strength dex it's called quality because all right, so back in Demon Souls we had heavy, sharp, quality.
So wait a second. That's weird to me. Then why is it not... Okay, now I'm confused. So why is it then not now called Dex if we have Dex within like the name of all of the stats? So clarify that for me first.
So it's just, it goes back to... So Demon Souls... so let me see. Let me find... Demon Souls infusions.
Because now, like, whenever he says you bring it up, now that you bring it up, because I feel like now I'm actually like missing out on something.
Sorry, I got my terms mixed up. But it was so in Demon Souls you had your regular upgrades, which is just upgrading your weapon. You had quality, which yielded equal strength and dex bonuses. You had crushing, which was pure strength. You had sharp, which was pure dex. And then as we went into Dark Souls, we had regular upgrade, raw, lightning. What did Dark Souls do for quality? I don't know if Dark Souls had a quality scaling, did it? Let me see. I think regular just straight upgraded. That's right, raw took away the path. Magic upgrade, chaos upgrade, unique upgradable, divine, enchanted. These don't look raw. Yeah, so Dark Souls we didn't have the quality. And then in Dark Souls 3, once we got back to 3, we had refined, which was the quality version. And then you had heavy and sharp return, which was strength and dex. And then in Elden Ring, it went back to, I think refined actually. No, Elden Ring, it's called quality again. So standard, heavy, keen, quality. So that the terms have changed throughout time, but it started as quality and it's ended as quality. So strength and dex is quality.
Quality. Okay. So for a quality build and for like, you could, go fundamentalist build, quality build, what would be a weapon that you would recommend across the board for players?
So the thing with quality is, you can actually use, the benefit of quality is you can use really anything, because even if something is more or more strength focused, a quality build, you can work in pretty much any weapon because you meet those weapon requirements. Probably one of the strongest quality weapons in the DLC is actually the sword you can get from Midra. The golden, I forget the sword's name, but the golden crux sword that everyone uses. But the biggest standout weapons for me, at least in general, maybe the strongest quality weapon in the DLC. Probably that one. Probably that, or the bow. The bow is pretty wild. For strength, I think the big standout would probably be Gazing Finger, which is a little bit of a hybrid weapon with its scaling, but primarily strength. Gazing Finger does insane damage. For dexterity, probably Claws of Night would be the big one for me, but the backhand blades can hit S dex. But backhand blades would be a good generalist weapon for pretty much any build. For intelligence, you don't have a lot of just pure intelligence weapons. You have a lot of pure intelligence spells, obviously. But intelligence actually used a lot of the older stuff. But Milady works very well in builds, I think, because of how fast it is. For Faith, a lot of the new Faith stuff went more for synergy, like, Faith Strength with like the Sunflower. The Inquisitor Spear you get before you go into the Abyssal Woods, though, is an incredibly strong Faith weapon with a good Ash of War, good moveset, and bleed. That would be my standout. And Arcane, it would have to be the Chicken Wing, the Bloodhound's arm, because it just does insane amounts of bleed or poison, depending on how you build it.
Yeah, no, the Bloodhound's Fang is really actually very good. I don't really use Arcane all that much, so whenever I see like people using the Bloodhound's Fang and who have a full decked out Arcane's build, it's really awesome to be able to see.
Blood Fiend's Hand.
What is wrong with me today? Seriously, Cowboy, I need help. I need help.
I think you need coffee and a nap.
This is actually coffee.
Probably in a reverse order. Yeah. Probably the nap, then the coffee. But Bloodhound's Fang is actually a very good quality weapon. It tends to scale a little bit heavier in dexterity, but it does excellent on quality builds. You can supplement it with a Great Shield. That's what I used in the original walkthrough. But the Blood Fiend's arm, I just call it the Chicken Wing, so it looks like a chicken wing.
It just looks like a chicken
wing. It's the chicken wing, yeah.
It's a chicken wing.
Chicken wing beats bosses.
It's kind of like what the pizza cutter was in Bloodborne.
Yeah, it was. No, it's not the Whirligig Saw. It's the pizza cutter. That's what. Yeah. Serves its purpose. Back in Dark Souls 2, there was the. I don't even remember what it was called. We just called it the drumstick. It was like the smelter. I think it was a smelter hammer. Let me see. What is it called? Yeah, smelter hammer. It's just the drumstick because it looked like a literal. It looked like a chicken drumstick.
I can't. The random names. I can't.
The drumstick. It goes bonk.
What about the Storm Hawk axe? Have you used that one yet?
I messed around with that a little in the base game. I don't know. My thing is the base axe moveset is so terrible in Elden Ring. You don't have, in terms of like confirmed follow-ups, that it just kind of falls apart. The new the Death Knight axes have a very strong Ash of War. That was actually complete dog shit at launch because it wouldn't track enemies. So like if this is an enemy, you would do the Ash, you dash at them, and then you go brr, 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 and you would spin right past them. Whereas now you'll stay on the target and spin, making it incredibly good. But that was one of my biggest disappointments at launch because I got it and I was like, yo, axes are finally going to be good. We got dual lightning axes. We have an iframe dash in with a spin to win. And then I would spin straight off the target and I'm like, rip the dream. It's gone.
No, it kind of reminds me actually of casting in Dark Souls 1. It's why I didn't use any magic at all in Dark Souls 1 because you would see the magic, like you would see like an orb go towards the enemy and then it would just like go slightly to the right. And it's like, are you kidding me right now?
Good old Dark Souls 1 tracking.
It's so terrible, but it's also that's what makes it good to a degree is how terrible a lot of the tracking and bugs are with it. So, I mean, like the one thing that I do have to say about Dark Souls 2, though, is that it has an incredible co-oping system, like probably the best I've seen in any Souls game.
Which one? Dark Souls 2?
Dark Souls 2, yeah. And people are still like playing around with it, which is great.
Yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of the soul memory mechanic. That was a problem that never got fixed with the re-release, unfortunately. But I don't know, Dark Souls 2, it'll always be like the unloved stepchild of the Dark Souls franchise. If they ever remade it, I think if they just removed adaptability from the game and gave us back the standard animation sequence, I think it would be a better game outright. That'd be the biggest change I think it needs.
Yeah, I mean, like if they redid it the way that they redid Demon Souls, I feel like everyone would fall in love with it even more so. Yeah, to be honest.
I mean, there's like Dark Souls 2 did have some faults. There were probably too many humanoid bosses. They relied very heavily on like Dark Souls Fight Another Night. But there were some really cool zones. There were some really cool encounters. And like I said, the biggest fault of the game, I think, is just the adaptability because it's, hey, here's a stat that you need to level to be able to roll and drink your flask properly. The very, very odd design choice.
Yeah, it's strange, but also endearing the way that they did certain things. But I like the way that they, did the story. They kept the story intact with it. But the one thing that I kind of found the biggest issue with was that, and this is both a good and a bad thing, but the way that enemies will die after you kill them 12 times is like, for me, that doesn't jive well with me.
Little, yeah, it was a weird choice of, if you want to murder enough, you'll never know eventually stuff will stop spawning and then you can safely progress.
Yeah, and they're literally like, all right, fine, we give up. Just let them kill us and let them have it. It's fine. But one thing that I did find interesting, because that I finished Dark Souls 2 this year, and one thing I found really cool about it was the way that they left it kind of open-ended. And you can take that either way, because like the ending of it was good and bad, because you had like Nishandra, who you killed off, and then you'd have to go through like this whole other thing in order to kill off the king. But in order to get that ending, going through all of that would require basically like another full playthrough of the game, technically, if you didn't get everything already.
You got to get all the crowns and pull them all together, and yeah. There were some interesting design choices in Dark Souls 2, but there's still I have some fond memories of it. I just never gone back and done a proper walkthrough for it, because it's borderline as daunting as Elden Ring in terms of just the sheer scope of the game.
Not only that, but you move so slowly. It's like you're wading through water every single time you're moving.
There's a. I always had people ask, should I just start with like Demon Souls? And I'm like, honestly, you probably start with Dark Souls 2, because once you've played one of the faster Souls games, trying to go to 2, it feels like you're, Goku walking around with the training weights on or something. You're like, why do I move your character? Like the especially with no adaptability, like you go to grab your Estus and your guy's like,
it's so true.
It's like, dude, heal, move. And
you know what the ironic part about that is that you move faster on a fucking ladder than you do walking.
Yeah, the ladder animation in Dark Souls 2, you had Jimmy Quickfeet. You're just like, you're going up.
It was so shocking to me. I was laughing my ass off when I played that on stream. I was like, how the fuck is this guy moving like the Energizer Bunny on a ladder, but I can barely get him to dodge whenever a random enemy comes by? Help me.
Yeah, some weird design choices for sure.
Oh man, and especially like with Dark, because I just finished Ashes of Arendelle DLC for Dark Souls 3, and that boss, oh boy, the final one, that was great.
Yeah, Frida's she's up there in terms of the hardest Souls bosses, I think, just because you don't often see 3-phase boss fights. So it's like, you think you're getting through her, and then the big dude comes out, and you're like, I can handle a big dude, and then everything disappears and she's invisible, and you're like, well, fuck me, I guess.
That was fun though. That was so much fun.
Fight. It's a very high skill ceiling fight, I think.
Yeah, I think it was really, I don't know if you experienced this as well with certain Souls games when you were first playing them, but do you ever get that moment of where you think that, wow, my reflexes are not where they should be?
Thankfully, those are still good. I mean, I got through. So the Sekiro walkthrough was deathless, and so my reflexes are never going to top that. But being able to do that, I'm like, all right, if I still got this level of timing, I can handle anything a Souls game is going to throw at me in terms of timing. Because Sekiro requires such an insane level of rhythmic reflexing, just like.
That is something I wanted to talk about with you, actually. I know it's not a Souls game, but to talk about Sekiro for a second, when you see people playing at Sekiro and they get internally frustrated and you see like those, anger compilations, do you think that not necessarily the anger, but the frustration that people have towards Sekiro is justified? Or do you think that it is, something of we're like, okay, if I beat it, then you can do it too?
I mean, I think the thing with Sekiro that is fundamentally different from every other Souls game is the freedom of approach. In Sekiro, your only option is to literally get good. You need to learn the boss pattern. You need to react fast enough to the mechanics. You need to learn the counters. There isn't, like take Radon, for example. It's an insanely challenging fight. But, all right, he's pumping out a lot of holy damage. Let me put on some holy mitigation or a holy great shield. Or, he has an insane health pool. Let me fall back on rot and bleed and things that are going to do HP % damage. Whereas in Sekiro, there's none of that. There is no like, oh, just, adapt your build, change this one thing. You need a little more poise. Like your only option is to get good. Which I can understand why that gets frustrating to people, because whereas in the Souls franchise, there's usually something you can change to overcome the difficulty of the challenge. And sometimes it's just as simple as you hitting your dodges, right? But sometimes it's also, let me make a minor tweak to my build, not necessarily a full respec, but let me change out a particular ring, change out a particular weapon or a shield or something, and that makes the difference in the challenge. Whereas Sekiro, the defining factor is your ability as a player. And so for a lot of people, it understandably gets frustrating, because it's like, well, what's the problem here? Well, problem's you, my guy. You are the problem.
That's what I thought whenever I played against Ishin Sword Saint, because I literally had a moment of where like my brain is saying, yes, I can do all of these moves. My hands are like, no, what?
Yeah. And it gets frustrating because, especially a game like that, you're forced to see yourself falling short, and you're like, there's, you can learn it, but if you ultimately just can't execute what you learned, then it's just frustrating.
And what's fascinating to me, especially with Sekiro, when I played it for the first time, going into that boss, Genichiro is replicated as a boss in its moveset throughout the entire Soul series. And I find that the most fascinating, because when I see a boss like Radahn, or I see a boss like, even Moog, like we see similar move sets of that to Genichiro, to a lot of Sekiro bosses. And I feel like they're implementing so much of what they utilize in Sekiro with the fast pacedness, with the ability to really understand like the build of the boss. They're utilizing that in so many of the Souls games.
I think in general, we saw a pretty big increase in speed. With Elden Ring, there's a lot of memes that compare like Elden Ring bosses to like older Dark Souls bosses, and the speed of the boss, the grandeur, the amount of over the top effects. It's definitely dialed up for Elden Ring. Like I said, look at a dragon fight in Dark Souls compared to Bale. You have Bale, flying around the arena, hurling down bolts of magma, and then he crashes, and big lightning, fire, magma explosions, and Egon shouting in the background, and you're like, holy shit, what is going on? And then you compare that to like Red Dragon and Demon Souls, where it's like, it's closer to like Mario, you're like, run, hide, run, hide, run, hide. Okay, we're good.
Literally just shooting spears at it. The most gimmicky boss in the entire game. And I'm thinking, wow, this boss looks so epic. Pew! Oh, okay, never mind. What I found very fascinating about when this DLC dropped, there was an article that came out where they said they had quote unquote journalist mode before. And I find that funny as a so-called journalist. I'm like, people are complaining about the fact that journalists might have gotten it too easy if they got a key, which is ridiculous because it's all in the same ease level. It's just a matter of how you play and how you adjust according to your skill. And the fact that like people are starting to write about it, and people are complaining about the fact that, oh, you know what, people are using ashes and using all of this. And I know it was a huge discussion resurging again after right after the release of this DLC. What do you think about this entire kind of debate that goes on about the ashes and everything? Because I feel like it's just pure gatekeeping at this point.
No, it is. We were talking about this on stream yesterday about how it's something that is very unique, I feel, to the Souls community, where there's this misconception in the Souls community that, Dark Souls is some pinnacle of accomplishment when it comes to difficulty. And my view is, at the end of the day, Dark Souls it's a game about knowledge. If you know the boss's moveset and you know the boss's weakness, you can trivialize 95% of Souls content. Take a look at Midir. Midir, I think, is considered one of the hardest bosses in all of Souls. He's doing Shin Godzilla moves, he's running all over the place, but like, you can just run up and do the Pestilent Mist and just kind of chill at his crotch and run in circles, and he'll die after like 3 minutes of you not really having to do all that much. And it's a perfect example of, knowledge can trivialize so so much of the Souls experience, and that a lot of the struggles people have is because they don't know what they're up against. But then, so the second thing is that, you have these people that they impose difficulty restrictions on themselves, like, oh, I'm not going to use bleed or summons or whatever the case is. I'm killing the boss the intended way, and the intended way is really however you want to kill the boss. But it's so weird seeing people try to impose their own restrictions upon others, because, like, take the same application and apply it to any game. It would be like Witcher fans being like, oh, you used signs in your playthrough? Oh, I only play signless. Like, why? The Witcher uses signs as part of his thing. Or, you're playing Ghost of Tsushima. Oh, you pulled out a bow? Imagine using a bow, and like, why? They gave me, there's multiple bows. There's armor sets around bows. Or you're playing Cyberpunk. Oh, you used smart weapons that track the targets. Like, that's what intelligence builds do. Like, you don't hear that in any other medium, but for some reason, Souls fans have this unhealthy obsession with trying to stay pure in the way they play, and it's so strange to me. It's so strange because, and to be clear, like, play the game however you want. If it makes you happy to not use ashes because you want a higher challenge, that's fine. But then trying to call out other people because they didn't do it the way you did it, it's fucking weird. It's cringe. I like to, my favorite thing to people when they bring it up on stream, I'm like, bro, it's like you're, walking in someone's house when they're masturbating and then being like, yo, man, you're holding your cock the wrong way. Like, that's what it's like. Like, you're literally judging how someone else is handling their business in their own time. Like, and they're like, it's not like that at all. I'm like, oh, it kind of is, man. Looks like I'm playing the game by myself. You're playing the game by yourself, but you want to tell me I'm not playing it by myself, right? Like,
yeah, it's like a perpetual pissing contest with everybody, like stipulations that people make for themselves. And it's like, why make it so difficult?
The funny thing is, like, if you look back at the very start of Souls with Demon Souls, the opening trailer for the game shows summons, because the whole idea of the game is it's supposed to be this unforgiving world where the challenge may seem insurmountable on your own, so it's fine to call on others to assist. That has been a core ideology of Souls since the start. So if people don't want to use summons, that's fine, but to suggest that summons are unintended and contrary to the Souls experience, that's fucking clown shit.
Yeah, people want to behave like, oh, summons are inherently a bad thing, when in reality they are baked into the core principle of what the franchise is. Yeah. And that's what I found kind of ridiculous in a way, because I saw, like, there was what was it? So many people were giving crap to other creators about, like, using summons or beating a boss too fast, which I was like, that shows skill. That shows determination.
And the thing is, like, everyone likes to harp on, like, oh, use summons, or use blasphemous play, but, like, the reality, like I said, going back to the knowledge topic, like, just to paint a picture with multiple builds, you're using pure strength. You can use super heavy strength weapon in Lion's Claw, and you can stagger lock pretty any boss in the game. I've seen people literally just Unga Bunga Radon down to where they weren't even dodging. They were just spamming Lion's Claw. They would stagger him. They would crit. He would get up. They would keep doing it again. And they would tank through the damage, dodge one move, Lion's Claw, stagger him, do it again. If you're using Dex, you can do insane amounts of just bleed buildup and fast attacks and counters to where you're outpacing the damage the boss is doing to you. If you're doing int, you're able to cast spells, and in some cases nuke bosses before they can react. If you're doing, I mean, God, my faith build, if you know how to build faith correctly, I have had bosses where I go in and I drop like one Burno Flame and I chuck half the boss's health off in a single cast. I did an arcane playthrough using fists and killed Rolana in under a minute. I like poisoned her. She tried to do a sweep. I jumped over it, kicked her, procced the poison with the new ash, and did something like 6,000 damage up front. Every single build in Elden Ring, every single archetype has insane damage potential when you know what you're doing. And at the end of the day, it's a perpetual goalpost. Eventually it's, oh, unless you were, rune level 1 fists only, no blessings, it didn't count. Which is why the whole thing is bullshit. People should be able to just let people play how they want. And if you want to play different, but don't take your experience and expect others to adhere to your experience, because otherwise you're just a weirdo who judges how someone else masturbates. That's it.
I've never heard someone use it like that, but I'm so going to be using that now, actually. That's
I think
beautiful.
It points out the absurdity of it. Because I mean, like,
is.
literally, imagine any other, there's no other game that does this. There's no other community that is unless you did it this way, it's not right. Like, no, it's only insults.
There are some bosses that I will admit are a battle of attrition, of where you just have to, pounce through it and keep hammering and hammering until it's done. But like you said, most of the bosses can be done where you work smarter, not harder way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing of where, like, I think a lot of people just make it unnecessarily difficult on themselves. So they feel like, oh, I did this, so I'm the king of everything. And it's like, no, you just made it harder on yourself because that's just the way you wanted to play. And that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird.
It is. But, hopefully, people, I mean, my biggest hope, and it might be unrealistic, is that people hear our conversations and they, if they think that way, they'll get inspired not to anymore. But I don't hold that much hope for that many people anymore, but it's okay.
Yeah, I've tried to push it for, since the start of Elden Ring now, play how you want. Don't judge others how they want to play. I mean, my only thing is don't use exploits. Which, ironically, I had somebody try to argue that, because we were talking about I was talking about co-op when the perfume glitch was going around, and I sent out some tweet. I was like, I've been doing a lot of co-op lately, but it's kind of disappointing seeing so many people just abusing the glitch to instant get bosses. And people are like, I thought you said play how you want. What happened to play how you want? And it's like, well, yeah, play how you want, but you're not playing how you want. You're bringing an exploit into someone else's game and instant killing content. Like, that doesn't feel scummy to you? Like, we're not talking about you coming in with the build that you handcrafted to, I'm going to kill this boss. We're talking about you running around using an exploit, something that breaks the system.
Yeah, and that's exactly what a lot of those perfumes were doing, because it was strange that even a lot of people were getting mad at the patch that was happening, and it's like, good, they saw something that needed to be fixed and they did it. Yeah. Everything that got fixed with that, especially the Commander Gaius, that was probably the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, his start. Commander Gaius is the one boss I just don't like in the DLC. I hate his hitbox. He just sucks ass.
Same. It took me 2 hours to get that guy, and it was a nightmare. It was absolutely, like, even with my Mimic, it was a nightmare to get through.
Like, my favorite kill on him so far was with the arcane build. I just abused the corner of the wall, how, like, you can kind of tuck in, and I sat in there and I used the bail incantation, and so it was like me, here's a corner, here's him, and Bale's incantation would just hit, and I did it like 5 or 6 times, and I was like, die, asshole. Like, I'm not playing this game of grab ass where you're chasing me around. You will die to me roaring like a dragon through a wall.
Oh my god, do you remember that first one in Sekiro, of where it was basically the tell of where, oh yeah, no, this is where we know if players are going to get through it or if they're going to die. I forget the name of the boss entirely, but it was the one where he comes in riding on a horse, pronouncing his name just loudly.
Yeah,
that guy. It reminded me of that, and I was like, flashbacks.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
But one of the last topics I want to go into is, what was your favorite boss out of this entire DLC? Even side bosses and mini bosses count.
Probably Bale. I think when I first fought Bale, it definitely seemed like insurmountable, and the more times I have fought him, the more I have gotten down his moveset. The thing with Bale is there's so much flash going on the screen. There's a lot of shit you can dodge that doesn't look like you can dodge. And so figuring out how to dodge that stuff, and then you have Egon doing his Moby Dick dialogue in the background, and it's a very very epic encounter.
It's very cinematic, very Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was very nice. I think my favorite in the entire DLC would have to be R'Lana, because it reminded me so much of Pontiff from Dark Souls 3.
Yeah, big Pontiff vibes for sure.
Yeah, it was really great. And just seeing that second phase come to life with the dual swords of the fire and the magic, it was wonderful. I loved it.
I would give honorable mention to Midra, because the music for that fight was a big Dark Souls 3 vibes. Very like, oh, this is a showdown like that. I don't know. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I haven't finished that boss battle yet, but that was very interesting even to hear that. The score for Radahn in the second phase reminded me of the Neverending Story. It was very cinematically done. It was so good. Like hearing that, I was like, oh wow, it's actually like, bringing back some of the 90s kids vibes here.
Yeah.
But
that's a good one.
But Fighting Cowboy, I want to say thank you so much for joining me again on this podcast. It's always a pleasure having you on and discussing Souls and Souls-like stuff.
Yeah, anytime.
So guys, be sure to check out Fighting Cowboy. His link and his tag will be in the title of this video. And if you guys like our faces and what we do, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell down below. May you find your worth in the waking world, your hunter. Stay casually nerdy. Now we'll see you all in the next video. Umbasa.